It's with great pleasure that I give the floor to the European Commissioner for Climate Action, Mrs. Connie Hedegaard.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to the organizers for yet another initiative. We all know what we just heard, how much uphill things are. But then at the same time, if you look 5 years back, 10 years back, we have more solutions than ever. We have more mayors than ever now dealing with this, making their plans out there. So it's not sort of black and black or gray and gray, but as Stefan just said, it's quite complex. But I think that this initiative, that is about showing solutions, inspiring each other. And this is one of my hobby horses, because I think in Europe we are not good enough at being inspired from what each other do, and we are too slow in scaling up solutions, speeding up solutions. And I think in this gathering, you do not have to say anything about how important it is exactly to do that. Scale up, speed up. You will know what it means that a few weeks ago, the world came across this 400 ppm. But those who are not into the technicalities there could just look around in the world and see what is happening. And see how the cost and the consequences of business as usual is actually just growing. So to go from black to green, which is the headline of this session, that is not a luxury, that is a necessity. Yes, for the climate, but I will argue also economically. And it's very clear that it will not happen by itself. Nothing, really nothing indicates that the climate crisis will solve itself while we are busy handling our economic challenges. And that is why in the European Commission we see it like this. We tend to believe that we have three crises. We have obviously a very severe and long economic crisis. We have a very severe social and job crisis. Now 26 million people without jobs in the European Union. And then we also have the climate and resource crisis. And what we believe is that the cost-efficient approach, how to try to address these three crises, that is to try to do it simultaneously. That is very challenging for political systems because that requires that we are not thinking in silos, but across portfolios also in the administration, as well as in the business community. At all levels of society, we have to start to think much more coherent, much more across traditional silos. That is a challenge. But the very good example of how you can combine these things, there are many, but that is, for instance, energy efficiency. It was just mentioned by Rainer just before. Energy efficiency, that is good for our competitiveness in Europe, it is good for our economic prospects in Europe, and it creates jobs. When last June the Commission analyzed which sectors in the European Union have the potential this side of 2020 to deliver a net contribution of job growth, three sectors came out. ICT, communication, health, primarily because we're getting older in Europe, and the green sector, renewables, energy efficiency, and waste handling. And we also saw during the crisis that the green sector has been more resilient job-wise than so many other sectors. It has actually managed to continue to create more jobs in the last 5 years. For how many sectors can you actually say that? So going green is not only compatible to growth, it is the way to grow in the 21st century. That also means that we must understand, which is also very complicated in politics, but we must understand that what seems to be a cheap solution here and now might not be the cheap solution in just the bit longer term. And therefore we need markets, we need solutions, we need all that, but we also need politics at all levels. What is it we can do at the European Union level? Briefly, I will mention three things: targets, pricing, and regulation. Very briefly just on regulation, but it's actually quite a powerful tool we have there. You know, that is where we can really pull innovation. When we are setting standards for cars, we are driving innovation, and at the same time the total value of what we export in the car sector in Europe has not been declining, it has been increasing. That's a very good example. There are many of them. Machinery, building directive, obligatory smart meters, public procurement, single market, many things. Maybe we can come back to it in the debate later, but one of the next pieces of regulation we will come up with from the European Commission, that is an overall regulatory framework for shale gas. Whether the member states want to do shale gas, that is their choice, energy mix is their choice, but we will come up with an overall European regulatory framework. If you want to do it, then here is what you have to observe, for instance, also when it comes to the environment. The other part is the targets, and it was already mentioned about the green paper in 2030. When I came back from Easter holidays last year, I told my team that now it was time that we took the next step and started to identify 2030 targets. And some of them looked at me and said, yeah, and how would you get that through? There is a crisis and it's impossible, and you know, I have to get anything through the Commission before we can sort of start to move things. But as you know, we had the discussion in the Commission. It turned out well. In March, end of March, we came up with the green paper saying it's high time now to define the 2030 targets. And what has already been mentioned, yesterday 27 heads of states endorsed that yes, it's time to set the targets for 2030. Yes, we welcome the green paper from the Commission. Please come up with more specific proposals before the end of this year. And then heads of states of Europe will come back to this in March. This is a very good and welcome step forward. But of course here, we should not fool ourselves. This is very good that we now have the process and the timetable. But I tell you, there are really many battles to be fought, because what is the content? How many targets? How do they interact? We are analyzing very much on that right now in the Commission. It might not be the same logic as we had with 2020. The interaction between the targets in order to go to a cost-efficient solution, that is what is the really difficult thing here. And then, of course, in the end, the very key issue, what should be the ambition level. But now we are really starting this process, and it was endorsed yesterday, and that is an important step forward. The last thing I will mention is the pricing. I know I would disappoint some of you if I didn't say anything about the pricing and the emissions trading scheme. You know that that is the key tool in European climate policies when it comes to pricing. It's also a good tool. It's a market-based tool, and it creates a level playing field internally in the European Union. And it has worked. However, as the surplus has been building up in this system, due to the crisis, it does not give enough incentive to do what we need most in Europe, to do innovation, to find the better solutions. And that is, of course, a problem, because the risk is that in Europe we take too many now cheap solutions that will lock in an energy infrastructure that will turn out to be everything but cheap for the future. Therefore, in the Commission, we have had this two-strand approach. First, the backloading, withholding 900 million allowances, not deleting them, but withholding them so that we auction them for later. We knew from the very outset, this is not going to solve all the problems in the emissions trading scheme. But that was in order to buy some time and stabilize the situation, while the governments and the European Parliament would discuss the more tricky issue around the structural options. I have many times said this should be a no-brainer to stop overflooding an already overflooded market. Now when I have seen the result of the vote in the European Parliament, I do not know if I can continue to call it a no-brainer, but that's basically how I see it. I know that some people say, don't intervene. It's a market-based system. Yes, but how many market-based systems did we have during the crisis? Where, of course, nobody would question whether we would have to do something about a very extraordinary situation. To my knowledge, the banks are also market-based, but it doesn't mean that we are not addressing challenges in the banking system. Just to conclude on this, the European Parliament and the Council now have a very, very big responsibility here to create the clarity on the backloading first and then on the structural options. And I have to say to those who might still be in doubt, it is very dangerous to believe that the alternative to a well-functioning emissions trading scheme, that is nothing, that is just to make it cheap to pollute. Because Connie Hedegaard and his 26 colleagues, they will still need to do something in order to live up to their binding targets. So the risk is that we will have a patchwork of 27 different regulatory frameworks. That should be in nobody's interest. Of course, when it comes to pricing, we have other things. I don't have time now to go into it. 20% mainstreaming to the benefit of climate of the whole EU budget. It's not a small thing. In the Horizon 2020, it's the research and development program for the next 7 years. 35% of all the money will be addressing our climate challenges. It's really a strong opportunity for your sector as well. We have the new entrance reserves, 300 to finance new projects. We have the fact that 50% of the revenue from the ETS in member states should go to invest in climate solutions. Many other things could be mentioned. Just the final thing on this pricing thing. We are in the Commission, in parallel with the 2030 preparations, also reviewing the state aid guidelines for help to energy and environment sector. If we want a more Europeanized energy system, then the logic is that after 2020, we must also try to consider how do we have, if not a standardized, a harmonized system, but a bit more harmonized Europeanized system in the way we subsidize energy and renewables. Very finally, Reinhard already touched upon it. Last year, EU 27 paid 1 billion euros for our imported oil each day. That should be a pretty strong argument, economic argument, for energy savings for renewables. But of course, what if now, maybe, we are in for some years with cheaper fossil energy? I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think it's sort of the panacea that shale gas will just solve all our problems. To get it right for the future, for the jobs, for our competitiveness, it is still in Europe's interest to go green. Today we have 30% of the global market for green products. That's not a small thing. That's really giving us a competitive edge, and it creates jobs, and we should stay on that track. My grandmother, she was born in 1901. That was when they had just globally passed the 1 billion people mark. My mother was born in 1936. That is the year where the world passed the 2 billion mark. I was born in 1960. There, the world passed the 3 billion people mark. My children will be living in a world with 9 billion people. We all know these facts, but I think that is why, even if we had not a climate change challenge, we definitely can see that we are in for rather many resource and energy challenges. And that is why pricing pollution, pricing CO2 is more important than ever. That might be why China is now doing an emissions trading scheme, working together with the European Commission on how to do it. And by the way, Korea is doing that. Australia, New Zealand, California, many big economies. And that is also why the political will to set climate targets, to insist that politicians job and politicians' responsibility is, even in times of crisis, also to think beyond the short term. And that is why it is more important than ever that we have you as a business community to show the good solutions. Even if there were no climate change challenge, and there is, and it's growing, but even if there was not, we would need to show the world that there is a lot to be gained for all of us, for the climate, for the economy, for the jobs, and for the security, if we are going more energy efficient, more resource efficient, or as it is called here, go from black to green. Thank you very much.